Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Dear Kardec Radio listeners, welcome back to the messengers in our home. Tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 50, Fernando's Discarnation. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home.
And as usual, before we start, let's take a moment to connect to God, our Creator. Dear Mother, Father God, with our hearts full of gratitude, we are once more united in your name to learn more about the laws of life that guide us, especially the cycle of life and death, incarnation and discarnation, and the normality of both, that are parts of going back to the spiritual world and then coming back into the flesh. We thank you, good spirits, for their assistance, for their guidance in our lives. The many messengers of the good that are willing to help us, that surround us, that help us whenever we need, that support the works at Kardec Radio, all people involved, collaborating. We ask for your guidance and inspiration for the discussion of tonight's chapter. And may we all listen carefully and put the teachings into practice in our daily lives. And with your permission, we now would like to start our meeting, and so be it. So here we are. Let's listen to the reading of Chapter 50. Enjoy.
Chapter 50, Fernando's Discarnation. When Aniceto took his right hand off of my forehead, I was no longer able to continue my observations of the infinitesimal. My vision included details very important to the general interest. However, I was nowhere close to that power of understanding that my mentor friend had transmitted to me by the touch of his elevated magnetic power. I concentrated my visual energies and continued to analyze the bone structure, the blood, the tissues, and humors, but the microscopic battle had disappeared as if by magic. In any case, however, I was greatly surprised as I now realized my X-ray ability. After offering the same instructions to Vicente, Aniceto got involved in something new. A group of grieving relatives was in the man's room, and an incarnate doctor was carefully examining him. At that moment, two spirits who were in the room and who had just given us the usual greetings approached Aniceto and asked him to help the dying man more directly.
Please, noble friend,
said the woman who had been the dying man's mother.
Help us remove my poor son from his wasted body. We have been waiting many hours for someone who could help us out of our predicament. I have tried to comfort him, but it's been no use,
she exclaimed mournfully.
He continues in a state of dolorous and terrible incomprehension. He's completely imprisoned by the sensations of physical suffering, just as he was tied to the satisfactions of the body during the course of his existence.
Aniceto agreed, adding, In fact, you can notice great gaps in the dying man's mental expression. It's clear that he spent his human life obeying instinct more than reason. Obvious indications of how undisciplined he was can be observed in his cellular makeup. We might be able to help him disentangle himself from his strongest ties to the physical realm, however.
That would indeed be a kind favor,
replied the distressed mother. Have you been given the responsibility of taking him? Asked our instructor, grasping the magnitude of the task. We need to consider that because it will take only a few minutes for full disengagement to occur. She gestured sadly and replied,
I would love to sacrifice myself a bit further for my poor Fernando, but I only have permission to help him in his final moments. My superiors promised to help him, but advised me to leave him alone for a while. Fernando needs to reconsider his past and recognize the spiritual qualities he unfortunately disdained. Tears and remorse in the solitude of repentance will be the bearers of calm to his unreasoning spirit. My desire to nestle him close to my heart, returning to times gone by, is great. Nevertheless, I cannot jeopardize the evolution of divine learning with my maternal tenderness. Fernando truly is the child of my affections. However, both he and I have accounts to settle with eternal justice. And as for me, I am tired of running deeper into debt. I mustn't strive against the designs of God.
At this point in the dialogue, the spirit clinician who had sent us there interrupted, politely informing us. Our friend is right. Fernando can't go with her, but her maternal intercession has been so noteworthy that I have instructions to take him to a safe place, a rescue home, where he will be able to glean the most advantage from his suffering. He will be sheltered in a vibrational zone that is inaccessible to inferior and criminal influences, even though it is located in the lower regions. Yes, I know, said Aniceto in a grave tone. That was a very prudent move. Then, as someone who had no time to lose, he asserted, the distress of his incarnate relatives here could make it hard for us. Notice how all of them are emitting magnetic aid in an effort to help the dying man. Indeed, a web of grayish, dimly illuminated strands seemed to link the relatives to the nearly dead patient. Such aid, said Aniceto, is useless now to restore him to his organic balance. We need to neutralize these energies because they are being emitted out of distress. But, above all, we must provide peace of mind to the family. And moving even closer to the sufferer, he assumed the posture of a magnetizer and declared, let's modify the status of the coma. After a few minutes of our mentor's efforts, supported by our respectful silence, we heard the incarnate doctor announce to the relatives of the dying man, well, his prognosis seems to have improved. Inexplicably, his pulse is almost normal and his breathing is normalizing. The three women gave a sigh of relief. Dona Amanda, said the assistant to the dying man's wife, it would be a good idea for you to go and rest a bit and take your sisters-in-law with you. Fernando is resting very peacefully now, and his situation is truly favorable. Mr. Januario and I will continue to monitor him. The women, along with two gentlemen who were getting ready to leave, offered contented and heartfelt thanks. The only ones who remained in the room were the doctor and one of the patient's brothers. His sudden improvement had set everyone more at ease, and bit by bit, the grayish strands that had been attached to the patient vanished without leaving a trace. Let's open the window, said the doctor, satisfied. Perhaps the air will help speed up our friend's improvement. Mr. Januario complied and opened a big window. I was deeply astonished at noticing that 3 horrible faces with diabolical expressions had suddenly appeared at the windowsill and were asking in a loud voice, "What's going on? Is Fernando coming or not?" No one answered. I noticed, however, that Aniceto gave them a sobering look, and his gesture alone compelled them to disappear. A half-hour passed, during which the doctor and Mr. Januario, practically unconcerned about the dying man because of his improvement, had begun an animated conversation about the world's problems. Aniceto took advantage of the peaceful atmosphere and began to remove Fernando's spirit body from its remains. I noticed that he had begun the operation from the heels, finishing at the head, to which the dying man seemed to be attached by a long cord, like that of a newborn child. Aniceto broke it forcefully. Fernando's body shuddered, calling the human doctor to the new situation. The process had been neither short nor easy. It had lasted several minutes, during which I saw our instructor use all the means of his concentration and perhaps of his magnetic energies. Informed by Mr. Januario, the deceased's grieving family entered the room noisily. The discarnate's mother, however, helped by Aniceto and the spirit physician who had brought us there, gave her son the assistance he needed. A few minutes later, while his family sobbed over the corpse, the little expedition consisting of 3 spirits, the 2 women and the clinician, left, carrying the discarnate to the Assistance Institute. I noticed that they didn't leave by means of volitation, but walked like ordinary mortals. I was extremely impressed. I was especially intrigued by the appearance of those satanic faces when the window was opened. Why such contempt for a sufferer? As we left the residence, our instructor looked at me attentively, and before I could formulate a question, he explained, "Don't worry too much about those rogues waiting for our poor brother Andre. They were unable to enter the sick room solely because the mother's noble presence prevented such an assault." And after remaining silent for a few moments, he added, "Each individual in life cultivates the affections he prefers. Fernando liked unruly companions, so it wasn't unusual that they were waiting for him at the time of his return to real existence. In Hebrews 12, Paul of Tarsus affirms that humans are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Well, this information was addressed to the human spirit nearly 20 centuries ago. Everyone then has the invisible entourage to which they are devoted on earth. Later on, when society learns the grandeur of the lessons of the gospel, all people will be more careful in choosing their witnesses. And as we said last week, we are getting closer to the end of the book. This week we're talking about chapter 50, Fernando's Discarnation. And this is the next to the last chapter. And as we also said last week, this chapter is a direct continuation from last week's story, which was the story of that man who was in a coma, and Aniceto explained to us how badly he was, right? That he was not a disciplined man and so on and so forth. But one thing that caught our eye and caught our attention was what Aniceto was doing to Andre for him to see the physical body, right? The tabernacle that is our body to our souls, how important it is and how many functions it has, and that we were not able at that time to see and understand. And apparently these days we still don't understand it, although we see it much better, at least if you are and if we are, if we need some medical attention, we have so many different ways of knowing our body and of seeing our body and our bodily functions. And that's how Andre starts this chapter, right? He starts talking about our body again, but this time he's not describing a lot of things as he did last chapter, but he is saying that when Aniceto took his right hand off of his forehead, then he was not able to continue to see what he was able to see. The bacteria and all the destruction, right, that the bacteria is doing to the body. He was still able to see a lot of things, and he says that he can still see in the body, right, and he can still see the bone structure, the blood, the tissues and humors, but he cannot see as clearly and as deep, if we can use the word deep for what he was seeing here, when Aniceto was helping him to see. Right after he says that, he mentioned something en passant, that Aniceto, after doing this to him, did the same thing to Vicente, which is interesting, because we see Andre describing things, right? And I keep wondering how wonderful and how interesting would that be if we could be able to see parts of this story through Vicente's point of view, right? Because he is there at all times. He is here together with us on these studies at all times. He's seeing what Andre is seeing, but naturally he has a different perspective because he has a different life story, right? So it would be very interesting. But what I find very impressive in Aniceto is this, right? Of course, that if we were at his place and if we had the responsibility that he has, that's what basically he would do, or we would do, right? If we have two apprentices, we would help them both, right, with the experiences. And here is Aniceto doing this. He gave the instructions to Andre, and now he gives the instructions to Vicente. But right after this, he goes and naturally he cannot stop, and he will not stop until he solves and finalizes everything that he needs to do. So he starts something new. Well, not completely new. He continues with the work with this man who is discarnating. At this moment, two spirits that were there accompanying the man who is dying talked to Aniceto and approached him, right, to ask him to help the dying man more directly. I mean, so that Aniceto could help them, help the man who is about to die. And we need to, because it is very important, we need to say what Andre just said, that it's not just the discarnates who are there, but there's a group of grieving relatives who are there at that specific moment, surrounding Fernando. And probably for the last time in this chapter, in this book, I'm going to mention the name of a person and maybe find a connection between what the name of the person is and what the person is actually doing, or what's the role of that person in our lives and in this specific chapter of the book. And naturally, we know by the title of the chapter that this man's name is Fernando. And Fernando is, according to what I was able to find, Fernando is a name that, among other things, but this was the most common understanding of what the name could mean, is Fernando is a brave traveler or a brave journeyer, a daring journeyer. It is interesting to see, right, that Fernando is going back, right, is traveling. And that's what we will all do, right? We will all travel back to where we belong, the spiritual life. And unfortunately, as we already know Fernando's story, he didn't use his life the best way that he could. And unfortunately, he is suffering at the end of his life. and at this very moment he cannot talk, or he cannot be, at least not to what Andre describes here. He is not awakened, he is not conscient of what's going on around him. But there's some people around him that are trying to help him, and one of them is, by Andre's description, his mother. And his mother is the one who comes to Aniceto to ask him for help. She wants Aniceto to help her son to disengage from his body, because probably she's seen that he is suffering so much. But she understands how important for him is at this moment to discarnate. It's his time already, his time has come, and unfortunately he is not able to do it by himself, or to be calm and be tranquil at that specific moment. So he is suffering. He continues, as she says, in a state of dolorous and terrible incomprehension. So he doesn't understand what's going on. So maybe he is fighting, and he is feeling everything that's happening to him, or that's happening to his body. And she describes it, right, when she says that he is completely imprisoned by the sensations of physical suffering, just as he was tied to the satisfactions of the body during the course of his existence. So it is interesting to see the correlation here that she makes between the sensations of the body while we are incarnate, and that once we are discarnating, and if that was the main thing that we had, was to be attached to the physical sensations of the body, to the satisfactions that we would give to the body, then we will feel the same thing, but on the opposite side of the coin, right, which is the sensations of physical suffering. And that's what he was most concerned with, was with his physical, with his material life, with his body and the satisfactions and the pleasures that the body could give. So it is interesting for us to once again think about this. And then we remember Andre, right, when he was incarnated, and he had all these social pleasures of going out to drink, and drink more than what he should, and have all these sexual pleasures and outside of his marriage. And then he had lots of different problems, physical problems, and once he discarnated, then he felt the terrible side of being attached to those physical sensations in the body, because you are attached to the body so much that you cannot disengage from it, and disengage from the suffering that it is, the decomposition of the body in that specific moment, at that specific time. Aniceto agrees with what she is saying, and then he says, well, in fact, what happened was he was obeying instinct more than reason. And we already talked a little bit about this last chapter, because that's what Aniceto was telling Andre and telling us. And then he says, and remember we talked a little bit about the mind, when Aniceto said that we still don't know and don't understand exactly what our mind really is, but our mind is the result of our education. But it's not just our education in this life, it's our millennial education, right? Our education throughout all our lives. So the more we repeat the same processes, we will keep repeating them unless we really focus on changing that. And that's exactly what this man, what Fernando, didn't do throughout his life, throughout his journey, right? He was so daring and so bold, but not as if he wanted to change, right, his ways, to go and follow a different path. No, he just wanted to go through, and then, unfortunately, he, as Aniceto says, right, that he spent his human life obeying instinct more than reason. And he goes on and says, obvious indications of how undisciplined he was can be observed in his cellular makeup. So it's interesting that something that is done mentally, that is done spiritually, or that is done psychologically, how impactful that thing is, or those things are in our material life, right, in our bodies. So it is interesting that Aniceto can see his indiscipline, right, in his cells, right, in his body, looking at the body. So as we saw last week when Andre was describing how bacteria wanted to win over some parts of the body, and then how easily the bacteria was able to do so because Fernando didn't have the will to fight that specific problem. And then Aniceto says that they might be able to help Fernando through his disentanglement, right, through this process of this discarnation, right, of death, to which his mother, Fernando's mother, says that, oh, that would be a kind favor from you. Aniceto looks at her and then asks, have you been given the responsibility of taking him? One thing that I didn't mention here was that sometimes, and unfortunately even amongst us spiritists, we still have some people who are very, very afraid to die, right? And naturally we need to try to pinpoint why we are afraid of dying. Sometimes it's not afraid of dying itself. It's much more of a feeling of, have I done what I should do, what I should be doing? Am I going on my path? Am I not, forgetting something that I should do? How am I doing? And then when we think about this, we start to fear what's going to come next. So one of the ways, or one of the best ways of not being afraid of dying, is to do the best we can at all times, right? And if we're doing the best we can, right, if we're really putting the effort, if we are called, right, then we were called, and then that's it, right? Getting prepared for it is doing the best that we can. We will only know once it happens, just like an exam. If I need to take an exam, but if I am preparing well to the exam, if I'm studying, if I'm really putting the effort to learn, then comes the exam. I will only know if I go through the exam, correct? So here's the same thing. But one other thing is that I wanted to mention here is that Fernando is dying, right? Fernando is going back to his home. And what is interesting is that he is there with some of his friends. And in his specific case, his mother is there. So those who sometimes we even forgot, right? Maybe I am the first one to die in my family, for example, and my mother is still incarnated, let's say, right? But maybe my grandmother, maybe a person who was not able to incarnate while I was incarnated, is there waiting for me. So there's always somebody, right, waiting for us. Be it a good spirit who maybe I don't even know. This person, this spirit will be there, right, to help us through that process. Even more if we are really striving to do our best, which is, as we can clearly see here, that Fernando was not one of those. So imagine if we are really putting the effort to become a better person, right? To think about these things, to think about the others, right? To do good works and good deeds towards other people, right? Imagine how well we will be received, and how can I say, how less eventful this process of discarnation would be or will be, right, if we, and I'm pretty sure you are, doing really the best you can to live life, right? Live life thinking that this particular life here, the life that we're living in this body, inside this body that God gave us, is just one small piece of who we really are. So there were spirits there waiting for Fernando, and although some of them are not the ones who will take responsibility for us, right, to take care of us, at least they will be there to receive us. And then they will go on living their lives, and we will go live what we need to live. That's one of the reasons why Aniceto asks Fernando's mother, are you the one who is responsible to take him wherever he needs to go? Because see, what we're going to need, what we're going to do now, it will not take long, and right after he gets disentangled from his body, somebody will need to take care of him. To which she says, oh, I would love to do this for my son. It would be a real pleasure and would be really important for me. But I only have permission to help him in his final moments. So she will only be there around the time that they are right now. They will probably take him somewhere with her, but then she will not be the one taking care of her son. And she says that her superiors promised to help him, but advised her to leave him alone for a while. And we all know, unfortunately, right, that since we are still in process of learning what love really is, we usually don't know what to do in certain situations if we love too much, because we will once again probably fail of doing what is needed to do. And that's what I understand from what Fernando's mother is saying here, because she says Fernando needs to reconsider his past and recognize the spiritual qualities he unfortunately disdained. And if she is there by his side, he will probably go back to what he was, and he will not understand that he needs to go on. He needs to change. He needs to understand things differently. And she would probably not help him in that way, because her love for him is so much that he is so big that she would probably start doing things for him when there were things and there will be things that he is the one that needs to do. And we understand that when she says, right, that her desire to nestle him close to her heart, returning to times gone by, is great, but nevertheless, she cannot jeopardize the evolution of divine learning with her maternal tenderness. She loves him so much that she would probably jeopardize his path, the path that he needs to follow right now. So her superiors told her, well, leave him be for a while, and let's see what's going to happen. And she says at the end, I mustn't strive against the designs of God, because I cannot go into debt as I've been doing for my past few lives. So it is interesting for us to reflect upon this, how much love and how much of love we really understand, right? We need to love ourselves. We need to love the others. But loving is not doing what the other ones want. And loving ourselves is not doing to ourselves everything we want to do to ourselves, right? We love, or I love chocolate, or I love whatever it is. Will I give myself that all the time? That would not be very intelligent, right? So unfortunately, we're still not completely certain of what love really means. Unfortunately, we mix, right, love with satisfaction of all the wishes of the person that we love, which is completely not the same. I would say it's most of the time is the other way around, right? If we love somebody, we will not do what the other person is asking at all times, right? We need to have knowledge, we need to have understanding, so that we can be able to really be able to help the ones that we love. So at this point in the dialogue, the spirit was the physician or the clinician who was there, and tells us, right? Fernando cannot go with her, but, and here comes the other side of the story, right? The side that she is not telling, Aniceto is not telling us. Her maternal intercession, right, has been so noteworthy that he, right, this clinician, this physician, has instructions to take Fernando to a safe place where he will be protected to be able to recover fast. So this is really, really interesting, right? Even if we are not doing the best we can, we are always helped because there's always somebody that loves us. Doesn't matter who we are, what we did. But on the other hand, hopefully we are doing the same. Hopefully we love somebody, and our intercession for someone, for somebody, can and will be able to help that person or that spirit in a moment of need, in a moment where the other person is suffering, just like what's happening right now. So Fernando's mother's love is so big for him that although she cannot be with him at all times, but because of what she does, because of her love, because of how she lives her life, how she has been living her life, she was able to gather resources to help him, even if he himself cannot do or cannot ask. So it is interesting how in the universe everything, just like Aniceto said a few chapters ago, everything has its purpose. Nothing is wasted when it is done for the good of somebody, of the universe in itself. So Aniceto says it is a very prudent move to take him out of what's going on. And Aniceto is already knows what's going on. We are the ones who don't know, right? So we know as long we will understand more and more along the reading, right? Along living. But Aniceto is there, and see, if when he puts his hand on Andres' forehead and on Vicente's forehead, and they are able to see more, can you imagine what Aniceto can see by himself? Right? So if he is able to help others to see what they saw, can you imagine what Aniceto can see? So he knows the story. He knows what's going on because he can feel, right? He can probably read everybody's minds there. And he is calm. He is using his energies in a positive way at all times. So it is very interesting to notice these subtle details in these stories, right? But then Aniceto says, well, we have no. He doesn't say, but by what he says, we understand, and by what Andre describes, that there is no more time to lose, no more time to waste. Fernando needs to discarnate, but us, or I mean, the incarnates who are there surrounding Fernando are not helping the situation, to which comes as another example of what we were just talking about, love, right? Naturally, when we have a loved one, right, who is in a hospital, right, we want to have that person with us, right? And our thoughts are usually to, oh, God help him recover. God help him get better. God please help her to walk again, in so that we can have her at our house once again. And the question here is, are these thoughts really out of love, Or are these thoughts out of selfishness? Naturally, if we look closely, we will say that they come out of love, right? We want the physical presence of that person. If we love that person, why would we want to let the person go, correct? This is usually what we think of. But there's also a saying, a very famous thought that says, if we love and when we really love a person, we set that person free. We let that person go. We let the person choose, right? And if the person chooses to stay, it's fine. If the person chooses to go, it's also fine. So once we really understand this, if and when we understand this, things really change in our lives, really change in our relationships, because we will understand that if we love the person so much that we allow the person to choose to go or to stay, and if the person stays, we will know how much love really is involved in that situation, because we all know that we are not perfect, and if somebody stays, is because the other person really loves me for even with my own mistakes and even with my errors and imperfections. But if we force a person to stay, then how can we be sure that the person is there because the person really wants to stay there? So it is a very interesting thought, and with regards to what's happening here, to what Andre describes to us, right? Because he looks at the patient and sees this web of grayish, dimly illuminated strands seeming to link the relatives to the nearly dead patient. And Aniceto looks at the situation and says that this is an aid, right? That this is something that maybe helps us to stay connected to each other and stay in touch and help each other. But at this very moment is useless, because it will not restore him to his organic balance. But it keeps that man alive. It keeps the body working, functioning, and doesn't allow the spirit who needs to disentangle itself from the body to disentangle itself from the body. So what Aniceto is saying here is not only that they need to understand, they need to do something to the body, to that man, so that the relatives can go a little bit farther away and then think about something else and don't put all their magnetic energies of their thoughts to allow or to have a certain control over the discarnation process. So this disentanglement from the minds of the incarnates to the discarnates, something needs to be done about that. But more than this, what Aniceto is reminding us is, look, if you are in a situation like this, right, really get prepared to it. Right? It's not to show indifference, but try to really, really ask God and ask the good spirits to protect that spirit that is about to go back to the spiritual life, but to help me and ask God through prayer, right, to help me understand the need that that spirit has at that specific moment. If that spirit at that moment needs me to pray for him to stay, that my prayers may help him stay. But even if it hurts, even if it's very, very dolorous, if my prayers are to help that spirit, my loved one, my beloved father, mother, sister, friend, if my prayer is to be for him to, or for her to be free from the suffering that the person is going through in this life, that I can be comforted by God and that my prayers are able to help that person to disentangle in a better way, right? In a way that doesn't make the person suffer as much. We all know how hard it is to let go, but sometimes we need to really think about this prior to something, as Andre is describing here, happens in our family and happens to us. So it is very important for us to really think about this and get prepared. One day it might happen to us, it might not happen to us, but if we prepare ourselves mentally, psychologically to this, if the time comes, we will at least have thought about this once in a while, and we will maybe be able to get back to the book one day in the future, read it again, and be reminded on how we should be striving to do better with our own lives and to help other people as well, if we are in a situation, or if they are in a situation like that. So what happens at that specific moment is that Aniceto goes and gives Fernando some passes to modify the status of the coma. So he probably infuses Fernando with some magnetic energies, just like we've been talking for the past few chapters about this. And then the body responds for a while, calms down. The doctors who are around the body said, well, everything now looks better. You should go and you should rest a little bit, and please go and take your sisters-in-law with you. And the wives, right? One of the people who are there by Fernando's side is his wife, which is called Dona Amanda, and there's also Mr. Januário, and so the doctor asks Dona Amanda to take everybody with her, and only Mr. Januário stays there with Fernando, and Mr. Januário is Fernando's brother. And then they go on, they leave. When this happens, right, Andre describes, his sudden improvement had set everyone more at ease, and bit by bit the grayish strands that had been attached to the patient vanished without leaving a trace. So you see how our minds, right, how our magnetic energies entangle the other. And if this happens to a person who is sick, right, is in bed, and there that group of people, right, thinking about that person, wanting that person not to die, then that's exactly what's happening. We are helping that person not to die. Although in this specific case, it would be much better if we, not that we wanted the person to die as if we were about to kill the person, no, but to leave the decision to God, leave the decision to who has the power to know what's the best situation to happen at that specific moment. So when they left, right, and their thoughts go to a different place, and they're more calm, and they're not thinking about this anymore, all that web of grayish strands disappear, and the spirit now can disentangle itself to leave the body behind and move on to a different state. What is interesting here, right after this, is that the doctor says, let's open the window. The air maybe will help speed up our friend's improvements. And then Mr. Januário goes and does that, right? He complies and opens a big window. I just said what is interesting here, and I have questioned myself, why is it interesting? There are at least two different things here in in these two small paragraphs. The first one is that the doctor doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And by our reading of the book, we already know that sometimes we don't see what we need to see, or we don't have that deep of a vision to really understand what's going on, right? So the doctor thinks that what does the doctor think about improvement of a person who is in their sick bed, right? It's to get physically better and then raise and walk, correct? And that's basically what we think about what an improvement in material terms is. So little did he know that he was actually right about the improvement. But since improving is not necessarily material improvement, right? He was to be improved in a short little while, correct? Aniceto was about to help him get rid of that body who is already dying and is not able to withstand the presence of the spirit anymore. So little did he know that he was right, but seeing it from a different perspective than what we usually think of improvement really is. And then there's the other thing, which is much less noted here, is about Mr. Januario, right? Mr. Januario complied and opened the window. And what is a window usually, right? A window is just like a door, but obviously in a different way. But it is to allow air, allow things to come in, things to go out, correct? So it is this limit, right? This threshold that between one side and the other side. And what about Januario? And what does this have to mean or have to be with this idea of improving, dying? What is the connection here? And actually, the connection is within Januario's name. What is Januario, right? What does Januario mean? And Januario means devoted to Janus. And what is Janus? So I'm going to read what is Janus that I took from Wikipedia, which is usually our shortest definition of things. And if you do, of course, a bigger research, you will find way more than what Wikipedia tells us. But it is true what Wikipedia says in this case here, and we don't need much more than this. So what Wikipedia says about Janus is, in ancient Roman religion and myth, Janus is the god of beginnings, gates, transitions, time, doorways, passages, and endings. He is usually depicted as having two faces, since he looks to the future and to the past. Do you see the connection here? So it is very interesting that at this very moment, the person who is there with Fernando at that specific room is a person who has a name of Januario, which is devoted to Janus, which is the god of, right, if we make the correlation with the mythical gods of the Roman Empire, of the Romans and of the past, is that god who was the person or the god responsible for passages, for doorways, for entryways, and has two faces, one looking back to the past and one looking forward to the future. So it is Januario there who is taking care of this passage, who is right there devoted to this man there who is going from one stage to the next stage, coming from quote unquote life to death, or coming from the material life to the real life, or the spiritual life. So it is really interesting that this is happening there. And then we go on, right? And when he opened the window, Andre describes that he saw 3 horrible faces with diabolical expressions, asking in a loud voice, "What's going on? Is Fernando coming or not?" Those spirits were waiting for Fernando. They were, quote unquote here, probably friends of Fernando because of Fernando's connections to those types of spirits, but they were not able to enter the room. They were not able to get inside the room. And since we already read the chapter, we know that the person responsible for that protection for Fernando is his mother. So his mother has all this, already have the ability of asking protection for his son, for her son, and not only asking protection, but deserves, right, to be heard and deserves to receive that help to protect her son at that specific moment. But this, Aniceto will make a comment, or Andre will make a comment on this later on the chapter. No one enters. Aniceto looks at the person, looks at those 3 spirits, and then those 3 spirits just disappeared. So half hour has passed. The doctor and Mr. Januario, who is there, taking care of that situation, or he doesn't even know what he is actually doing there, but he is there, and they are not concerned anymore about the man's situation because it has improved due to what Aniceto, to the passage that Aniceto applied to him, and they just started talking about things of the world. Then when that happened, the grayish things started to were already vanished, where we already talked about it, and Aniceto now will go and start the work of really disconnecting the spirit from the body, right? And there's the description, which is a very common description when we are talking about discarnation in Spiritism, which we usually say that the spirit usually starts to be disconnected from the feet up, because the connection, or the main connection of from the spirit to the body, is through the mind. And we already saw that when Andre talked a little bit about the mind and that flame that's right in the middle of the skull, right in the brain. And then he says that he starts to apply the passes and disconnect the spirit from the body, starting from feet up, from the heels up, and then finishing at the head. And there was this connection, this cord, this small rope or a small cord that connected the spirit when it was completely detached, almost completely detached from the body, that was connected to the brain. And Andre, or Aniceto, had almost like as if he cut that specific cord at that moment. So he broke it forcefully. He had to detach it forcefully. Then Fernando's body shuddered, calling the human doctor to the new situation. Probably if he had some machines connected to his body, the machines would have said, or would have beeped, or something would have happened there, and the doctors would have known. But at that point, the body shuddered, meaning that the spirit is not connected to the body anymore, so the body will not be able to continue to live. And even if we these days, at this moment, we still had the body connected to a life-sustaining machine, the body would probably still be living, because there will be all the circulation, the blood circulation, the heart would still pump, and but the thing is, the spirit would not be there anymore, and then there would not be any other way to relive that quote-unquote body, because at that specific moment, when that last cord was broken, was cut from the body, the that body is now just a body. It's not Fernando anymore. So when that cord is broken, that's it. There is no spiritual life connected to that body anymore. It's just a mummy. It's just the matter. It's just a collection of trillions of cells working together to sustain the physical life, but not a spiritual life anymore. So that process lasted a few, not a few. That process lasted several minutes. Andres says that it was not short and it was not easy. We have a description in one paragraph, so it looks to us as if it's easy and as if it's short. But Andre makes the point to tell us, look, this was not easy. And Aniceto, to what we know by now, he is a very experienced spirit. So if it was not short and if it was not easy, it means that and Andre is telling us this, it really means that the process of discarnation takes a while, and we have to put a lot of effort to do it, at least in this specific case. So when Fernando discarnates, Mr. Januario, who is the devoted to Janus to take care of these passages, he is the one who inform the family, looking towards the future now, since Fernando is not there anymore. Now we don't see much more about the physical side. Now we go to continue on the spiritual side to see what's going to happen. And what we see is naturally the family on the material side keeps sobbing over the corpse, and naturally they will start having to take care of all that is needed to respect that body that was the vessel, or that was the tabernacle for the man who was Fernando while on that incarnation. On the spiritual side, we see Fernando's mother, helped by Aniceto and by the spirit physician, to give Fernando the help that he needed, or the assistance that he needed. And while they were, the incarnate ones were crying and of course feeling the terrible news of the discarnation, the group of spirits who were there to help Fernando just left the place, carrying the discarnate to the assistance that he needed at the Assistance Institute that he would be taken to, right? And what Andres says is also really interesting at the end of this paragraph. He says that I noticed that they didn't leave by means of volitation, but walked like ordinary mortals. And it is to show that it's not just because we die that we change immediately, right? Fernando probably couldn't be taken in any other way. Maybe his mother could not take him in any other way. So that means that the spirits who were there to help, who could probably volitate or go in a faster way, but because they see and they perceive that the others can't do, so they do it the same way. So it is always for us to think about, it doesn't matter if I can do it faster, if I can do it this way. I can ask if the other person can do it as I can or as we can. But if we already know that the other person can't do it, just let's do how the other person does it, so we don't force anything on to the other person. So and then they walk, and then they will reach the institute when they can reach the institute. Andre was extremely impressed, he says, but as of this moment, he remembers those three spirits who were there, and that now maybe he is not seeing them anymore, right? And remember, these spirits, Fernando's mother Fernando and the doctor, now they're walking, right? They're just leaving the room. So maybe at this moment, those three spirits could reach them, right? And maybe that's why Andre is remembering it right now. Look, I'm leaving the room. Where are those spirits, right? And then Andre says that before he could ask any question, Aniceto explains to him, Andre, don't worry too much about those spirits. You know, they were unable to enter the sick room solely because the mother's noble presence prevented such an assault. So it is very interesting for us to really see and to notice how these spirits, they are noble, that surround us, how they create this aura of protection around them and around the ones who are surrounding them as well. So in this case, the spirits could not enter the sick room, right? So if the mother is going together with the son, it is natural that those spirits will not be able to approach them because that aura is not on the sick room, is surrounding the woman, is surrounding Fernando's mother. Wherever she is, that aura surrounds her, which brings it again to us, right? What is our aura? How much are we protected? Not because the good spirits protect us, but because we are working on our own protection, right? On creating this aura that doesn't allow other bad spirits or bad thoughts to go as frequently into ourselves as we wish they would not come. So it is very important for us to really think on about this protection that Aniceto describes of Fernando's mother as something that we can all have. It depends only on us. It depends on what we think, on what we do, how we behave, how we take care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, psychologically, and as well as how much we take care of our bodies, but in a much lesser way, at least for this specific case here. And after remaining silent for a few minutes, Aniceto adds, and he says that each individual in life cultivates the affections he or she prefers. So it is up to us, right? And here we see the contrast between Fernando's mother and Fernando himself. His mother probably didn't like unruly companions. On the other hand, Fernando, just as per Aniceto's description, liked unruly companions. So it wasn't unusual that these companions were waiting for him at the time of his return to real existence. What are our companions? What are the types of people? What are the types of friends that I am making? But more importantly, what am I as a friend to other people? Right? What type of friend I am in other people's lives? Am I a disciplined friend? Am I a good friend? But when I mean a good friend, it's not one that goes with everything the other one wants, but a good friend is one who is always there to help, always there to increase security on the other person's lives. And when security, by security, I don't mean physical security, but moral security or psychological security, right? A security of having a companion that go through, as they say it here, thick or thin, right? That's there always to support, to really be there when the other person needs. And not those types of friends who always forget their friendship, who is never there when the other person needs, who never gives up on anything that I need to do for the other. So that's not the type of friend that Aniceto is talking about here. And then he makes this very, very good citation from Paul of Tarsus when in Hebrews chapter 12, Hebrews is a book of the Bible, right? It's a Bible book that Paul wrote. It's a letter to the Hebrews, and when in Hebrews chapter 12 he says that humans are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and Aniceto reminds us, right? And we are spiritists, we think about this at all times, but sometimes we forget, right? So here is Aniceto reminding us that, look, Paul told this to us a long time ago. We already think about this at all times, but hey, let's not just think, let's live according to this. So everyone has the invisible entourage to which they are devoted on earth. So if I'm going out with people who are unruly, who are not trustworthy, who are bad people, who do you think, who do I think I'm going to have as companions or as witnesses, as these spiritual companions to myself, if not spirits of the same kind that I'm making friends here on earth, right? So when Aniceto tells us, later on, when society learns the grandeur of the lessons of the gospel, all people will be more careful in choosing their witnesses. How are we choosing our witnesses? What are the types of thoughts that I have? What are the types of behavior that I am having throughout my life? What are the types of friends that I'm making? What are then the types of witnesses that I'm having around me, around my life, around my mental life, around my spiritual life? That is a question that we should all pose to ourselves. And I'm pretty sure that as of right now, the witnesses of my life, because of you who are listening to this, are very good witnesses. So I'm glad that you are here with us, getting very, very, very close to the end of the teachings and of the reading of this great book, The Messengers in Our Home. So next week we will get to the very last chapter of this book, and then we will not finish our discussion about the book next week, but next week we will read and make some comments on chapter 51, which is the last chapter of the Messengers. So I hope you stay with us for a few more weeks when we will be concluding the Messengers in Our Home. Have a great week, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.